Hi, everyone, and welcome to Search Sessions. We're excited to have you join us. I'm Christine Proud, the Director of Content here at Boostability, and I'll be hosting our show today. We're so excited to have you. Search Sessions is a thought leadership series dedicated to helping businesses position themselves for success, no matter their industry, no matter their location. And every show has expert guests and business strategists, industry leaders to provide key advice and insights that you can apply to your business to elevate it to the next level. And that description fits our discussion today. We have both Colton Miller and Maya Teagle. They're our in-house Boostability SEO experts. We're so excited to have them today. So thank you for being here to both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So today we are embracing spooky season and busting all of those SEO myths that haunt your digital marketing success. We don't want to really waste any time whatsoever. We've got 13 myths to get through today. So we're going to jump into the agenda, which frankly is short, I will admit, but I'll first talk about some introductions into Colton and Maya and Boostability in general, and then we'll get into our myths. Some of these are user submitted questions. Some of these are just common myths that we hear from working in the industry, and I'll be moderating the comments and questions throughout this discussion. So feel free to weigh in on the Q&A and the chat features. I'll be watching for both of those. And then you can also follow along the conversation on Twitter. We're at Boostability, or you can share your thoughts with the hashtag Boost Search Sessions, and we'll follow along with that. And also, I want you to know, before we get into the discussion, we will be posting this talk on YouTube and our Boostability website later this afternoon, and we'll share it out in an email with everyone who is registered. So if you want to watch it again or revisit a point, you'll be able to have that resource, and we'll also share out the deck as well if you want to review that again. So with that, let's introduce our two guests. About Colton, he is also known as Big C to his friends. He's worked in search marketing for over a decade. He has previous experience in sales, customer service, fulfillment, and strategy with organic search. He's helped thousands of clients ranging from local startups to international enterprises and brands. Currently, Colton creates and tests and helps to execute the SEO strategies for the clients here at Boostability. And when he isn't debating or learning more about search marketing, he loves building and painting miniature models and gaming. And then Maya, she's our SEO manager on the marketing team here at Boostability. After graduating from the University of Utah with a degree in marketing, her focus has been on expanding her knowledge and skill set in SEO. Before joining our team here at Boost, she's gained experience working at several digital marketing agencies in Salt Lake City, focusing on SEO strategy development and fulfillment, as well as client account management. Outside of work, Maya loves to go on hikes with her husband and dog, play volleyball, bake and cook, and try new restaurants throughout the city. She loves fries. We're going to have this discussion afterwards. I want to know the best fries in this area. So Maya, I'll hit you up about that later.
Definitely.
Awesome. And then about Boostability, so you know a little bit of background about us and our SEO. We're the global leader in small business and partner-focused white label SEO. We offer affordable SEO specifically designed to meet the needs of small to medium-sized businesses. And our proprietary technology, Launchpad, tracks over 2.3 million keywords every month, which enables us to make strategic SEO decisions based on millions of bits of information. And not only that, we serve customers and partners all over the world. We're in 15 countries and servicing in 9 languages, and we're expanding every year. And in addition, we know our stuff. We get 86% of our customers to the top 10 rankings on Google within 6 months. And last year in 2020, we got 78,000 keywords for our customers to those top rankings. So with all of that, ultimately, of course, the goal of SEO, really to improve your website in the eyes of search engines like Google, obviously, right? But the world of SEO has in-depth methodology. That goes into making a campaign successful, plus the regular algorithm updates. We've seen, hundreds of those this year that leads to a lot of questions really and myths about SEO and its processes. So with that, let's jump into today's list of 13 different myths and our discussions. And we're beginning with one that I know I hear a lot. I'm sure Maya and Colton, you do as well. SEO is dead. Or maybe, okay, in this case, it is not dead, but Colton and Maya, over to you. Colton, let's start with you.
Awesome. So yeah, SEO is definitely not dead. It's growing. I mean, the reality is that with, hundreds or thousands of updates per year, it simply is evolving, right? SEO is no longer just, taking a hack at, title tags or meta descriptions. In fact, it's much more around strategy. How do we get links coming in? How do we create content that people actually care about / want to link to? And some of these numbers that we have up here, I think, speak for themselves, right? Top growing industry. I expect this year to be even more so. We're also seeing a lot of people pivot their marketing dollars, from traditional paid channels, social, whatever it might be, and pushing that over to SEO. So, I'm not sure if Maya has more to add, but it's definitely not dead. And in fact, it will continue to grow and evolve.
Yeah, I think but there's a lot of automation happening just about in any industry, and SEO is not. It's been affected by it. So I think that's where a lot of people get scared that SEO is a dying trade or a dying career practice, and things are evolving. So it makes it think that way. But I mentioned right here that there were 37 year to date confirmed and unconfirmed algorithm updates. And so while there is that automated aspect of SEO, there's also a very human element that tools and softwares just can't fulfill on. So it's very much a necessary practice for businesses, and there have to be practitioners and people who know how to decipher what it is that Google and other search engines are rewarding, how their algorithms are changing, adding that human element to the user experience, which is just a growing need, and it's becoming even more important without these algorithm updates. So
awesome. And with that, this is also kind of along the same discussion. We'll go into myth number 2. SEO is a one-time thing. Definitely not a one and done type situation. So Maya, let's start with you on this one.
Yes, it is constantly evolving. And even here, and like I mentioned, it's evolving because on average, you have like 4 or 5 updates rolling out a month, and one thing that was working in the past might not be working anymore. So you're constantly having to test out different strategies, what's working, what's not working. Search engines also really love to see new updates that you're actively working on your website, that you're actively working to improve the user experience, improve the content on there. There's things that get outdated or just no longer apply, that you need to go back and update through your content, through your meta titles, running audits at least every 6 months to see if anything slipped through the cracks or if there are improvements that can be made. So it's definitely not something that you're going to see success with if you think it's a one and done. It has to constantly evolve and change and grow and build upon it in order to keep up. It's a competitive industry. Your competitors are constantly changing. So yeah, that's what I have to say on that.
Awesome. So that's all I was going to kind of tee off with was the competition. It's constantly changing, especially online. I mean, the reality is that it's not just like, your direct competitor. It's not just Joe down the street that happens to offer the same service. The reality is that you're competing with informational sites. You're dealing with directories, aggregators, other people that want to just get, lead gen sites. You're dealing with so much more than just, one particular person or even a set of people. And so with that, obviously, Google is constantly changing what they value in terms of, on-site, off-site, but also user signals. And so it's one of those where, you could have a keyword that's been working for you for the last few years, and Google just decides to flip it to directories. And now you either have to kind of pivot your content to work for that, or, maybe that's not the right keyword. Maybe that's not the right focus for you. So always changing, will continue to change, and I think it's one of those things where if you're not constantly working on your SEO, you're just kind of digging your own hole to get behind on. So definitely not helpful there.
Awesome. And I want to add one other kind of follow-up question that's related to this is just kind of the time frame. I mean, SEO does take time. It's not just, you work on it for a month and you're good. I mentioned this in the introduction that, we get six months usually to get top 10 rankings. So along with this, it's not a one-time thing. Can you hit on just a little bit about why it does take a little bit of time to build that authority?
Maya, I'll let you take a crack at that first one if you want.
Yeah, in my experience, each industry varies. So depending on how competitive it is, how competitive the keywords are, where you compare with your competition, and like, is your website brand new? How big is it? How small? There's a lot of different factors that go into it, not just inserting a keyword here and there and then letting search engines do its thing. A lot of technical elements as well. How often is your site being crawled? Are there technical elements that are not as optimized that are inhibiting that process and not giving you that leg up? So yeah, that's what I have to say about it. It's hard to pin down into specifics just because each industry varies. But again, it's relative to that.
Yeah. Just to tee off of that, I mean, I think your brand and your effort that you've been applying is the biggest factor here. So, when we talk about, either our success or just general success, I think as an industry in general, it's kind of that average. So it's, some people see success within 1 month. Some people are very late to that game because it depends on where you are. And it does heavily depend on your competition, where you're trying to get into. But in general, if you've been doing SEO and you're continuing to do SEO, and even if you're just moving to a new vendor, provider, whatever it might be, there's a good chance that you'll see better success. You'll see quicker success. But if this is your first rodeo, or you're just barely getting started with some SEO things, or your website's brand new, yeah, it's going to take some time. And there's really nothing that you can do about that. I mean, the reality is this is organic. It takes time for you to grow. So if you want the billboard, buy ads. If you want to have a consistent presence, even after you stop marketing, quote unquote, SEO is where it is, but it takes time to grow that.
Awesome. Thanks for following up on that. Great. We're just moving right along. Let's hit up myth number 3, and that is search volume is the only thing that matters. Colton, after you.
Search volume, probably the bane of my existence here. But I mean, search volume, it's one of those metrics where it seems very clear up front, search volume is search volume, but it's not quite that easy. I mean, you have things like trends that fluctuate where, for example, we'll take like holiday season coming up here, Christmas ideas, Christmas gifts, those kind of keywords, very seasonal. So yeah, it might get, let's just say an average of 10,000 visits, but that is only technically in one kind of time frame. It's not something that is constantly there. Search volume, to kind of tack onto that, it is heavily rooted, heavily based on traditional paid platforms like Google AdWords. And so because of that, a lot of that data is kind of tailored to that section, being number 1, being number 2, being in that kind of ad section versus just in the organics. Click-through rate has such a big impact on this that it's one of those things where it's always good to have the data. It's always good to see it. It's always good to have that validation, but always take it with a grain of salt. I mean, I'll let Maya get into some of the, slight differences per tool, but in general, it's not comparing apples to apples. And it's never one of those things where if you see 100 visits, you're going to get 100 visits. Never. And so in my mind, it sets kind of a bad expectation, but again, it's good information, just not necessarily something I would say is the piece, the key piece of information to go off of when making SEO based decisions.
I agree with that. Just to build on that a little bit more, like Colton mentioned, it's not the determining factor. It shouldn't be a determining factor when you're doing keyword research. I'd say that your keyword intent it's becoming more and more prominent and much more essential to it. So when I'm doing keyword research or when we're creating content, we always rely on keyword intent more so than search volume. And just because of everything is shifting over to a user experience perspective now, enhancing the user experience, you're not going to rank for something that has that, like on paper from these tools with your search volume, low competition, like these data points look excellent and you think that it might be a great keyword for you to go after. But if your intent is not there and it's not aligned with what you're offering as a business, you're never going to rank on search engines for it. So, and like you mentioned, different tools offer different numbers for it. So don't take it out front value for it because it's an average and it's a good idea of what you can get. But don't knock out keywords that have low search volume, high intent, are lower competition, and long tail keywords, because those have typically been the ones that are better converting than a really high search volume term.
I was like, this is great. People are taking notes and they're giving great feedback saying that they can't take notes fast enough. So thank you guys for this awesome stuff. We'll just keep right along moving. Myth 4. This is one that I know I hear a lot in my position, is that SEO and social media don't impact each other, and they are independent pieces of your digital marketing strategy, but there is a little bit of interconnectivity. So Colton, let's start with you.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is one of those things where it's kind of like a, brand picture or a logo. It just kind of, it works together. So if it's not really in sync or it just doesn't make sense, you're probably going to either, lose visitors, lose brand trust, different things like that. So in general, when it comes to social, that's your chance to kind of interact with your audience and kind of build the relationship. While SEO, I see it as it's more exploratory. So you're getting somebody who doesn't know you, who's not familiar with you, who is truly searching for something. And so it's a good chance for you to kind of marriage that and say, hey, glad that you found me. Here's a chance for you to interact with me. Here's a chance for you to see either my daily work or something that I've recently done. So it's a very good way to basically say, here I am, and here's why you should buy from me or take my service, whatever it might be. Maya might have more to add on to that.
Yeah, just along it's not as social media is not going to help your rankings directly, but it can have that indirect effect on it. So if you're sharing really great content on your social channels, and like Colton mentioned, you probably have a more targeted audience, the type that's more aligned with what you are trying to go after as your business with your products and services. If you're sharing your great content on there, and you can increase your chances of exposure and visibility and getting more page traffic back to that specific page, signaling to Google and other search engines like that, this is what people want to see, this is valuable, hence helping you increase your visibility on search. So it definitely has, it's a different channel, but it overlaps and it has that indirect impact on search engines and your SEO strategy. So using the two in hand will definitely help it.
Sweet. Okay, myth number 5. You need to use as many keywords as possible. And with this, I also want to, if you could touch on a little bit of like, keyword research and keyword intent, things like that as you go through your answer. But Maya, let's start with you.
Yeah. I think in the past, this was a way that people found like a loophole, or this was their way of getting ranked higher, when it was more along the lines of frequency than it is now. You shouldn't keyword stuff. I always like to take the approach. It's easier for me when I'm writing content, to take a little bit more of a conservative approach, because for me, it's easier to find opportunities to add more keywords if I'm not using it enough, rather than trying to figure out where I can take it away. So that's the approach I take. The little goes a long way. Be strategic in where you place them, but always err on the side of user experience. And with algorithms getting smarter with natural language processing and being able to understand your content, you don't have to stick with specific exact match keywords anymore. You can play with semantics, play with the variety of stuff to make it sound like you would be having a conversation with another person. It's no longer writing content for a search engine. That gap is being bridged and has been bridged with previous updates. So now you're writing for a user in mind, and always just try to make it as natural as possible. That's just the way I like to go about it. But Colton, what do you have to add?
Yeah. So, I mean, like the second points have here, basically context is the bigger thing that I see when it comes to keyword usage. And to take that even a step further, I think content usage is a big part of that as well. Unfortunately, the days where somebody wants to see a wall of text is just kind of not there. So having supporting elements in terms of like a tool or a picture, again, all with the right context makes sense, right? If it's something related to the keyword, maybe something that's slightly related to the keyword, as long as you have that context there, that's the thing that truly matters. I mean, Maya already said this, but search engines are getting smarter and have been smarter. And so the days of kind of having to really convey that and really chop that down for a search engine, really not there. It still is good to have those variations and that verbiage in there, but hopefully that's more of a learning and something that you naturally put in there versus force in there, right? If somebody's constantly referring to, specifically users, if they're referring to it via, keywords or whatever it might be, a certain term or a certain phrasing, then you should adopt that, or you should consider at least trying to use that. So that way it makes sense for them, makes sense for you, and then you just naturally get more of those keywords added in there. But definitely err on the side of the user. search engine's really not there. And then, the only piece to add to that is just try to add more content that can help with that context. And it's not just text, it's other things. It's videos, it's reviews, it's images, tools. It's so much more beyond that.
And I would add, you don't really think of the search engine as a user on your website, but at the same time, that's exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to improve your website and the keywords and content with the user in mind, but at the same time, Google and that algorithm is a user. It's trying to see how, people would use your website and follow a logical path that way. So you also just keep in mind that Google is a user of your site. So kind of mirroring what Colton said, you design with that user in mind. Awesome. And then we've had a couple people asking about content and your keywords, but we have a few other myths that specifically involve content a little bit later. So we'll hopefully get to those questions in a couple minutes. So just if you've got that question, we'll get to it, I promise. So with that, myth number 6, and we're going to talk backlinks, which is another, I think keywords and backlinks are two of the most common SEO terms and phrases and questions that we get. So let's, Maya, let's start with you. All backlinks are created equal. Myth, true or false?
Myth. Going along the trend. No, backlinks are certainly not created equal. And everything is shifting again more to relevancy instead of what was in the past, where in the past you wanted to get quantity over quality. And a lot of people relied on domain authority as the sole metric for it to go after. And so my advice when it comes to this, if you're going to be starting your backlinking process, identify some quick wins here and there. If you're in a local market, typically local smaller websites don't have as high of a domain authority as some of these larger ones that are sexier, like Forbes and Search Engine Land. And they're great to obtain still. That domain authority is still helpful, but it should not be your sole, it should not be the sole thing that you're going after. And rely more on relevancy now and vet it, because if you're working with this is a big thing, like when you're working with different, maybe some agencies or providers that have relationships in the industry already that can get a foot in the door, or you need some help with some link building, and you have a list of websites that you could potentially go after and outreach to obtain a backlink from. In that instance, they might all have a really great domain authority, but a backlink from each one of those is going to serve different purposes, and it may not be the best thing for your site. So I definitely say to vet each one. Is it relevant to your business and your products or your services? Look at topical breadth and scope. If it's beyond it, don't even go after it, because Google's going to understand that it's an inorganic way of you obtaining that backlink. So go for things that are much more relevant to your business. Local news stations are a great way to go after that too, because they're typically willing to help out other small businesses or local businesses in their community with spreading awareness about them and getting backlinks listed. Colton.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on a lot of main points there, but one of the key things, at least what we point out here, is that content has to have some sort of link. It's kind of a basic reality here. You can do some sculpting there with like internal linking and whatnot from your homepage, stuff like that. But in general, you have to give a reason, some sort of incentive as to why this content is valuable. And links is quite frankly it. That said, and tying in with what Maya kind of left off there, you don't want to just have everything under the sun. That would be awesome, but it's a very clear way that that's weird. It's odd. So you definitely don't want to get impacted algorithmically that way. So creating a variety of links, a variety of types, hopefully ones that get kind of published at different times. Those are all things that just are naturally going to occur. And that's what you should be striving for if you're ever doing any sort of, backlink building or looking to purchase those, whatever it might be there, create content for it. Basically, you just want to make sure that you're trying to, have those things come in naturally, not trying to spur anything there, not trying to automate anything there. Basically, do it with a human, do it so that it fits your audience, make sure it makes sense having those things come in. But to the same end, don't shy away from, getting nothing there. You don't want to always shoot for that Forbes, things like that. Sometimes a directory or a citation, something that is deemed, lower value, is exactly what you need. And Maya already hit on this, but if you're local, that's a prime example where if you're local, maybe you're in a more rural area, you don't need a whole lot. You just need a few of those positive, backlink signals to basically get your kind of content out there and give it that slight leg up that your competitor may not have. So, bear in mind your competition is always going to be the barometer on where you have to be on this scale. And then if you've been doing things for a while, sweet, you've already got that train rolling. But if you're not, this is part of the reason why it takes time to get ranks. It takes time to have that naturally come in. And at the end of the day, it's not all equal, but it is all important. It's always good to have that link coming in.
Awesome. And with that, this is right along the same lines. I would almost argue a myth 6.5, but domain authority is a term that's thrown around a lot in the SEO world. So, of course, you want to get those high signal, oh my gosh, the word is not high authority links essentially, but that's not always possible. So, domain authority matters, but it's not the end all be all. Colton, do you want to start us off with that one? And then also maybe just give us a couple of recommendations if you're not sure where to start with link building, where to go from there.
Absolutely. So just kicking it off here, domain authority is one of those things. It's kind of like search volume, but this one's even more kind of ambiguous in terms of domain authority could mean a variety of things. So we'll just take the basic like DA and PA page authority. Those are Moz metrics. So that's all based off of their data, their particular subset of data and clients that they have in there. So it's not fully encompassing. If a new website got created yesterday, there's a good chance it's not in their index. There's a good chance it doesn't have any kind of influence there. And so that DA, PA stuff, it might be useless in that case, which if you're using this for backlinking, might not be the best way to go about it. To take that a little bit further, this kind of concept of authority at that domain level or even that page level, it's a little bit more kind of fluid than just like for a backlink or external sources pointing to your external content. It's actually more, at least in this day and age, it's more around you as an expert for your field or your kind of content and where you are. So it's so much more beyond that. So, advice wise here, always look for the thing that's going to give you the best kind of contextual relevancy there. So if that means, slightly modifying the content, sweet. If that means hitting up, a post that's been live for the last 4 years but has a broken link, those are great ways to essentially fit your kind of page in there. But again, keep in mind that context. It doesn't make sense to have you get submitted to, let's just say 1,000 website directories if there's not really good context there. That's a very clear way that something odd is happening. But if there's good context, even if it's on an unrelated website, that is exactly what you need because that context is helping, create that bridge. A good example here is nobody wants to get, a link from, let's say, a mommy blog site, for example. That's, maybe a common concern. But in that sense, if it's tied back correctly, that link could be one of the best links you get. Obviously, you can get their users coming through. But again, that context is what's helping bridge that gap, helping give that link its kind of credit or its authority. If you're just getting, we'll take Forbes here. If you're just taking Forbes, you get a link in there. That is, Forbes doesn't count anyways. But in general, if you're just getting your content out there, you're just getting a link, it's not doing you any good if that context isn't there. So context is by far the biggest thing. And then domain authority, it's so much broader than just this authority or external metric. It's all about your expertise, how well known you are, what your brand reputation is. Maya might have more to add to that, but so much more than just links.
No, I think you touched on a lot of it. And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I personally don't take domain authority into too much of the consideration due to all those things that Colton just mentioned. There's a lot of other valuable metrics to look at when it comes to backlinking. Also like traffic, they may not have that site that you're looking at, may not have the highest domain authority, but they may be getting a lot of valuable traffic that can translate over to your site and increase your visibility on that end as well. So I like using SEMrush for that stuff. Ahrefs is a great tool as well. It gives you, again, an approximate number. It's not, take it for front value, but you just use a variety of different tools that you have at your disposal to get the best idea of what kind of third-party sites can serve your site best and ultimately your site visitors.
And then do you have any thoughts on just what to do to maybe try to get that link? Are you just doing some outreach to their content people, or what's some of the best ways to even start your link building process if this is new for you?
Yeah, I would always low-hanging fruit first. I think my go-to, which it's not the end all be all, but it's a good way to get some quick wins here and there. Look for unlinked brand mentions. If people are already mentioning your site in a positive light, despite like maybe some publications may have a clause where they can't link back to if it's like a press release or something. But most websites in that manner, once you reach out to the author or somebody at the organization, they're more than willing to link back to you. And that does, like Colton mentioned, context. That link does help. So that's a great way to get started. If you don't have a lot of time, link building is such a time-consuming process. So really, that's my first place to go. And then also looking at your competitors, who's linking to them? Are they a worthwhile website to reach out to? Can you figure out like why are your competitors getting these backlinks? And can you do something even better, like the skyscraper technique? Can you create something more valuable that you can then reach out to a variety of publications and sell it? Like you are adding value to these publications as well for more context, more up-to-date information, updated statistics, a lot of these different factors that you can offer to show value for that publication. And that can get you a backlink.
Awesome.
Maybe just to add slight bit onto that, obviously the natural content's great, but one thing that I will point out here is like sponsorships, partnerships, going out and just kind of naturally building those relationships, maybe with a local organization, even citations, right? The things that, may not give you that direct, link value. If it can basically, pull in a user and again, create some context there, those are fantastic places. And if some of those mean that you can support like a little league team and you just magically get a link, fantastic. You're hitting two birds with one stone, right? So I wouldn't, say go out and like buy 1,000 links. You can get on Fiverr to do that. It's probably not the best idea, but in general, don't throw it out. Don't dismiss it right away. In some cases, that context, that, payment for potentially getting a link or being featured on a website, it can be fantastic for you. And it can be kind of a quick, cheapish way of getting links in there. Again, you don't want to go crazy with it, but it's something that can be helpful here and there. And again, partnerships is just a fancier way of saying sponsorship, where you work with another brand. Some cases they want to charge for it. In other cases, it's maybe sharing some data that cost you probably at some point. So there's all sorts of different ways that you can kind of leverage either what you're producing or money, whatever it might be, to try to get more of those mentions, more of that link equity out there in the world. So just last point to throw in.
No, I love that. Thank you, Colin. These are great. Okay, next ones, we're going to switch. We know we've already talked a little bit about keywords, but the next couple are going to be about content specifically. So this is a myth that keywords matter over content. And I will just start out with this, how exactly are you going to get your keywords on your website? It's through content. Content is not always just your articles. There's a whole bunch of stuff that has to do with how you get your keywords onto your website. So Maya, I will start with you.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about user experience, but clearly keywords still have a role to play because you have to create something that people are searching for. So there's a good way to mix it. I would not prioritize like fitting your keyword in a certain amount of times, like once every 100 words. I think that was like the recommendation before that people just really honed in on. Again, write from a user experience and make it natural. Provide as much value as you possibly can. And follow the best practices when it comes to EAT, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. You really want to place yourself in the user's shoes to try to predict some of their questions. tools can also show you what people are searching for, what kind of questions they're asking in relation to that overarching keyword topic that you are trying to address. Keywords still do matter in terms of like exact match versus shifting them around a little bit in their structure to be more natural. I don't think that really matters, but placing them in certain areas, I do still think that it is helpful based off just some tests that we've done. Placing your keywords in your meta title, obviously your header title, and in some of those higher weight areas. And like Christine mentioned, image search is still a big thing. You don't have to just place your keywords in traditional article format. There's so many other areas on your website that you can insert these keywords to help give you a leg up in that area. Colton, over you.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the analogy going up here, but the way I like to think of this is keywords is the how. It's how somebody's finding you, right? It's ideally the reason why somebody is even seeing your brand or your website to begin with, but it's not the why. Content is the why. And so if you have a mismatch there where, maybe it's not the right fit, then you're failing the why. Why is that person here? Why should they stay? Why should they dive deeper? And so keywords is great. It can help, influence some of that potential creation on the content side, but you have to be able to kind of predict why the user is there and basically help them do something, right? Whether it's learn something, whether it's do something, buy something, go somewhere. I mean, all those different intents that you have there. So again, keywords are good. They can help figure out, how people are looking for things, but it's the content that is going to really drive home whether that user, probably ultimately converts on you, from you, whether that's a lead, whether that's, giving your brand a call, whatever it might be. So don't miss the forest for the trees here, or trees for the forest. I'm not sure, but, just make sure that you're staying focused. Use keywords to understand how people are searching, what people are using, verbiage wise, and then make sure that your content is really coming in solid to keep that user, or at least help them accomplish what they're potentially looking for.
Awesome. And similar, we've already touched on this a little bit, but only new content ranks on Google. I've heard this one several times throughout my career, and obviously that's not true, but new content will get you a spike in traffic, but there's obviously a whole bunch of things you can do to revamp the content you already have on your website. So Colton, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, so new content's great, and there's a lot of context. This is kind of like the linking question where it really just depends. So sometimes new content is great. So we'll just, like top 10 lists or best, things like that should constantly be changing or constantly be updating. That's where fresh content can have a slight edge, but for the most part, it's all kind of based in history. It's all based in trust. And so because of that, you need to have some content that's legacy. If you're constantly switching to new content, or you're constantly destroying or pulling down all of your content to point somewhere new, you're doing yourself a big disservice there. Part of that EAT metric is basically how long has your brand been talking about this subject, across years, potentially even decades at this point. And so that is something where you have to be considerate that some of your content should stay up there. You might need to come in there, do a slight refresh, but you're not changing the URL, you're not changing the bulk of the content. Again, you might be adding like a picture or something to help users out, but you're not going in there and just kind of overhauling everything and redirecting it or whatever it might be. So that's a big part of it. And then the other thing which we kind of touch on here is that, the days of, unfortunately, the days of having 10 blue links, it's not a thing. So new content doesn't necessarily mean just text. It could mean, pictures, videos. And again, that also comes with that authority. If you created, YouTube's a good example here, where if you created a YouTube channel 10 years ago, where would you be today? You could be making a bulk of your money off of YouTube. You could be having that as a giant funnel for you. But that's all, we all wish we had that 2020 vision, hindsight. But, it's one of those things where make sure you're creating content, make sure you're creating that evergreen content. And then, make sure that you are, if needed, adding that new content in there. But it's definitely not the new content that is the only one that gets attention. And in fact, it's most of the time the opposite.
Yeah. I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit more, build on the content repurposing. We've done tests internally on several of our pieces that we've gone and optimized and repurposed again with more up-to-date information, new statistics, not just text. Like Colton mentioned, we've added images, we've gotten creative with our graphics and our visual assets to incorporate that as part of like enhancing that user experience. And typically what we've seen is it takes at least like 3 months for it to be fully crawled and reached its peak. So you might not see that immediate reward right from the get-go once you hit republish, but it will grow, it will continue to serve you. And Google has come out explicitly and said that refreshing and creating, not just creating fresh new content, but repurposing your existing content is a big signal of EAT for them, because it constantly shows that you are working to enhance your user experience and provide the best possible information and value to your site visitors, your clients, and your customers. So for us, like, we have the data to show that it absolutely does work. So don't forget about it. And like Colton mentioned, make that evergreen content. Don't date yourself with your URLs that would cause you to have to create something brand new. Be strategic with what you're creating, and then just make something that can be enhanced over time where appropriate and where applicable. That doesn't mean it's a necessity to do so every year. But just as times change, go back and have that repurposed to serve you again.
Yeah, and I would also add that your content strategy is not just, living and dying by your content calendar exclusively. You want to, of course, that's important to create new content. Let's not just disavow that, but you want to have a mix of new content, of evergreen content that will continuously help to like build that authority and continue to rank for you over time. You want to go back and repurpose some of that. You want to optimize your keywords and your meta titles and your pictures, your images, your videos throughout the website. There's a whole bunch of things that can go into your content strategy that's just continual work throughout. There's enough that it could fill almost every single day if you wanted to, as far as content optimizations go. Okay, so with that, we're cruising through these. Love it. We're on myth number 10. We've mentioned citations a couple times here. This is a user submitted question that we had. Are accurate citations a big deal? Colton, let's start with you.
Yeah. I mean, I think the number one thing is yes, it's a big deal. I mean, the one thing you don't want to do, and this is the big scenario for everybody, Google, you, a user, whatever it might be, is, somebody goes to like your Yelp page and you happen to have your old address and they wanted to stop in to, either buy something or do some window shopping, whatever it might be, and they go to a wrong address. That looks terrible on you, looks terrible on Yelp, it looks terrible on the search engine if they referred you to that page. And so those are things that search engines, other websites, citation sites, they want to avoid as much as possible. Again, that all stems back to the user. The user ideally needs to have that blind faith, and have that blind faith, prove fruitful. And so it's one of those things where, NAP, right initially, or if you've been around for a few years, may not be the total picture, but it is a big kind of brand and a reputation thing for you. If you're, if your citations are all over the place, or you have phone numbers that are all random, which one do they call? Do those phone numbers still exist? If you've got a phone number from 5 years ago that you don't use anymore because somebody decided they wanted to have like a tracking number or whatever, and you never reverted that, you're losing phone calls and you're losing that trust. And as you lose that trust, and as you kind of bleed that authority, if you will, and that trustworthiness, you're going to get shoved further and further back. So NAP is always one of those things that just make sure that you have your directories there. And then to tack onto that just a little bit, extending from the last one, ideally, you should be going into these, citation sites, and you should be updating them, adding pictures, going in and talking to people that left you reviews. So it's the same like we talked about before. It's not a set and forget kind of thing. You should be going back in and constantly refreshing it, which means you should also be making sure that it is up to date with the most recent information. COVID has made this even more paramount and more important, where you got to make sure that if you have a holiday coming up, you are being explicit with your hours. And even if it's the same, just make sure that you double check that. Make sure you say, hey, we're still open. And COVID is one of those where if you have different hours based off of that, maybe staffing is a little bit short. Again, make sure that you update your hours. There's nothing more frustrating than going somewhere and it's the wrong place, or it's closed, but it says it's open. And then you don't know if they're the right brand anymore. And so you just go somewhere else. Don't do that to your users. Don't do that to yourself. It's so much easier to just kind of keep up with it and go through maybe once a month. check it, and add to it. Just make it part of your monthly routine.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and that happened to me recently where I love TJ Maxx, and I went there recently to get something, and due to like labor shortages and everything, I guess they shut down a little bit earlier, or 2 hours earlier. And this is first world problems. I was upset because I'm like, oh yeah, I have plenty of time. So I planned my day around that. I needed to go and get some items, like necessity stuff, not just wants. But so I got there thinking I had plenty of time just to see the doors were closed. And I was looking, like, I double checked their Google My Business and all that stuff. They said they were open. So it's just infuriating when you have that information disposable to you, you trust it. Clearly your customers are trusting it. So just to harp on what Colton mentioned, definitely go back and keep that updated. And it can be a time-consuming process, but fortunately, again, there are tools out there that can help you, like Bright Local and Yext. Makes it easy to just update it in one central spot, and then it'll go through and filter it out to all of your citations that you built through them. So you don't have to go into all of the individual ones to go and do so yourself. So that's a huge time saver, something I like to do, especially when you're just strapped for time and you have priorities elsewhere.
Awesome. And one other, I mean, citations are really important, especially for local businesses and just kind of like what they're servicing a specific community. We've had a question a little bit about essentially geo-targeting. Maintaining those citations is crucial for, your local area, but can you talk just a little bit about how to do that for your website as well, and to make sure that you have the correct information across your citations and across your website so that it's all consistent? Maya, do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be targeting specific locations, I think it's really appropriate to have a dedicated space on your website to highlight that. For example, like SEO in Utah, definitely having like a landing page that services that information, and making sure that, again, your NAP, your address or your hours of operation, whatever it may be on that page, is consistent with what you're featuring and listing across the internet on other citations and directories. I think I saw one question where if that's good to add it into your meta titles and whatnot, and I absolutely think so. I've seen success with it, adding in specific locations there in your content. Definitely does help you rank from a local standing. And then also pairing that with different local search strategies like online review generation, optimizing your Google My Business, optimizing your citations that you have out there. It's not just one thing. There's a lot of different areas that blend together that you need to address. So it's like a little web that they're all working together. Colton, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, take that even one step further. I mean, dealing with thousands and upon thousands of local clients, I can tell you that it is fairly common for the address to be missing, or for the name to be slightly, spelled differently, or for the phone number to just be different entirely. So, I think we noted on one of these points here, but it's no longer one of those things where this NAP is just a good practice, even at the citation level. It's something that you as kind of a business owner and as a website owner need to be consistent with, just to keep up the standard. And if you're in like a rural area or somewhere where it's less competitive, this is even more important, because this could be one of those kind of leading factors to why you're number one or why you're number four. So, NAP is one of those things that still is a common mistake. Even, it's one of those things where if you've been building the website and it's, been going for the last 8 years, there's a real good chance that you may have one or two odd pages that are just referencing disinformation across your site. So you want to make sure that you go in and correct that. But again, I kind of come back to just make sure that you're kind of keeping up with your website. Ideally, if it's in the footer, making sure that that's the same footer used across everybody or across all of your pages. And then just make sure that you're using the same consistent information. So, yeah.
Awesome. I think that answers their question. So thank you, guys. This is going great. Myth number 11, mobile optimization doesn't matter if your target audience mostly uses desktop. Colton, let's start with you.
I wish. So, I mean, the reality here is that regardless of how many users you have coming in through like a desktop channel or whatever it might be, it doesn't matter, unfortunately. And I hate to say this because desktop is so much better. It's so much easier to fit things in and make things look nice. But the reality is that Google crawls things via mobile almost exclusively now. And so because of that, you're getting judged based off of the mobile representation of your website. So if you are stuck always viewing it in the browser and saying, you know what, it looks great. Look at this awesome, image we have here. And then we have like a video and we've got all this stuff. But then when you look on a mobile, somebody has to scroll forever before they find text. That's an issue. That's an issue because Google is seeing that same exact thing. And so when they compare your website to somebody else who is probably taking that care, they may say, you know what, this is the better mobile version. So I'm going to show this to users constantly. And so that's something that you want to avoid. You don't want to give any reason for distrust or for kind of that second guess on your website, on your content. So, it's always one of those things where it's great to design it in desktop, but the final version, the final, approval needs to come after you view the mobile version. And if you are seeing that, user experience especially is just terrible on the mobile version, or, it takes me a minute to get there or a minute to find the content where it's all hidden, those are things that you have to correct. You have to go off of the mobile version first, and then, again, or at least for the final approval, work on the mobile version. But don't neglect the desktop version either. Just make sure that they're both cohesive with response and all sorts of different features that are coming out. There's no reason that you can't have both versions look fantastic and feel fantastic. Maya?
I don't have much else to add on that except that everything's now being crawled and indexed from the mobile perspective first. So in terms of SEO, it's a necessity now. It's not a question of whether or not I can do it. You need to do it. And it doesn't have to be anything overly fancy, just like Colton mentioned, it has to be responsive. And there's absolutely a way to achieve both a responsive experience on desktop and mobile. So treat the two the same, not independent of one another.
Yeah, just to tack in there just a little bit. I mean, the landscape here is changing. We note it here. Basically, mobile's growing, but one slight kind of thing to think about is that a lot of desktop searches come from people at work. It comes from people who actually have a desktop or have kind of a dock at work. And so because of that, that landscape might be shifting. More people are working from home. More people are just kind of out in the wild and using their mobile. So there's a real good chance that, this speculation or even your user base is moving mobile and probably will move mobile, at least for the majority over the next year or two. So it's not as far away as once predicted or even just thought.
Awesome. Myth number 12, there is no such thing as too many 301 redirects when it comes to SEO. Maya, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, definitely. Redirects they can be a double-edged sword. Clearly, having a broken page on your website is not a best practice, and you should redirect that to the next best possible thing for your site visitors and users. So be strategic with how you are creating your content, how you are removing it. And it kind of goes back to, again, the repurposing. Create your evergreen content in a way that your URLs aren't going to date you or cause any limitations. So you can avoid just adding, removing. And on that note, you're not going to be penalized if you have a lot of redirects. However, it just can cause some technical issues, functionality, user experience wise, like creating redirect loops and chains. Especially if you're a large site, it's hard to stay on top of that. And sometimes if you have a lot of different people working on your site and there's not great communication on what is happening, who's creating what, who's removing and redirecting things, these redirect chains and loops can cause some issues with slowing down your site potentially, or sometimes if it's too much, you can get to a point where your page is unresponsive and can't load. And so it just hurts your overall user experience. So while you won't be penalized, it does impact you negatively in other areas. Colton, do you have anything to add on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I'll up the ante just a little bit in saying that redirects you want to avoid as much as possible. If you can keep a URL or even repurpose the content, but maintain that, that URL slug, do that as much as possible. Whenever you do a redirect, again, you may not be directly penalized, but you are going to lose some trust. You're going to lose some of that potential authority. So, if you've got 4 links pointing to that page, every single link potentially counts. So if you're just randomly redirecting, you're giving Google the chance to essentially say, you know what, this page used to have some good authority going to it. It's not going to this other page, which we feel is unrelated or random. And so we're just going to not count those 4 links anymore. And that hurts the overall site. It hurts that page. So, as noted, in the slide here, just make sure that you're being strategic with that. Make sure you're being thoughtful. And then there's no reason to not try to reuse URLs if possible, right? I mean, if you're just getting rid of like an entire section, you stop servicing, or stop offering a certain service or product, redirects are absolutely a necessity there. But if you are going to be either, creating new service or have something to replace that, try to reuse that URL if it makes sense. Don't just get rid of them. Don't just redirect at random. And don't, as kind of noted in the later slides, don't create chains. Don't go back on yourself there. And then don't create too many. If you're holding on to like pages that were 10 years old and now they just redirect so many times, it's probably about time that you can get rid of that really old page and just kind of let Google forget about it. I think the most recent poll there is like, if it's older than like 2 years, you may not need that redirect. And so if it's one of those where that page has been 5 years old, it never really had some links to begin with, or doesn't have any now because it's been dead for a while, just kind of consider removing that. You really don't need that. So, not redirecting everything, but just make sure that you're being very judicial with how you are considering redirects and how you're actually implementing those.
Awesome. Okay, we have reached myth number 13. It's our final one. It's been an awesome discussion, but this last one is SEO is not necessarily for everyone. We're going to go full circle. We kind of talked about this at the beginning as far as SEO is dead. It's definitely not. Also want to clarify that SEO can benefit everyone. Colton, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, SEO, quite frankly, your organic presence or how people just find you or what they find inside of search is you. It's your brand. It's your representation online. And so because of that, SEO, depending on its various elements, maybe you don't need everything, right? If you're a brand new, local company, you probably don't need what Nike has, where they go and create elaborate marketing campaigns that are built around creating, large user engagement and getting traffic and links that way. But you know what you do need? You do still need links. You still need that optimization. You still need to make sure that you look shiny and great when it comes to being online. And to take that a bit further, and I've said this for years now, but as long as you have a business, as long as you have a website, period, you should always be doing SEO. You are never done doing SEO. You can never stop doing SEO until you get rid of the business, sell it, whatever it might be, or you get rid of the website, sell it, whatever. So as long as you have a website, as long as you have a business, you always have to be doing SEO. It can, again, come and go. You can spend a little bit more here or there. You can do a little bit more content here or there, but you need to always improve it. You need to always build on it. You need to always take care for it. And if we're just being real frank, SEO is not just your website. I mean, it sounds a little daunting, but it is everywhere that you're online. It's your social, it's those citations, it's even where you're being reviewed from, aggregator sites, it's everything. So just make sure, you're always taking care of that. And if you're not sure where to start, this is where SEO professionals and just other, agencies are fantastic. They can help you. They can help you in specific ways, or they might be able to help you in something kind of overarching, kind of the overall plan. Maya?
Just to add on your side of things, SEO is definitely meant for everybody. And like you mentioned, it's no longer a nice to have, it's a necessity. Despite search volume and those elements where I think a lot of businesses will believe that SEO is not for them if their industry doesn't have a lot of search volume or those types of traditional opportunities. There's so many other areas of SEO that every website, if you have a website, and if you don't, why don't you have a website now? You definitely need it. There's a lot of different aspects of it that can serve you in ways outside of just search volume and keyword traffic in those senses. So, yeah.
Awesome. So with that, that's our 13 myths. So I want to thank you to Maya and Colton for going through all this. I hope everyone got
Of course.
Awesome. And as always, if you need help with your SEO, Boostability is here to help. If you're finding some of those points we mentioned today just a little overwhelming, you're like, man, that's more than I can handle. We're built specifically for small businesses. Reach out to us at boostability.com or give us a call. We can help you through all of these things that we've talked about today. And also be sure to check out boostability.com/search-sessions for updates on our next show coming up in November. We'll post the topic and the registration link shortly. You can also go back and watch our past shows and this one again if you want. So with that, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful day.
Bye. Thank you.